Hailing a taxi or booking a rideshare. It's something we've all done at some point, a simple, everyday decision. You open the app, tap a button, and within minutes a stranger arrives, ready to take you where you need to go. But what if that stranger wasn't who they claimed to be? What if stepping into that car was the last decision you ever made? It was past midnight when Samantha stepped out of the crowded bar, her phone clutched in her hand. The air was crisp, and she shivered slightly as she pulled her jacket closer. Her friends had already gone home, and all she wanted was the comfort of her bed. She opened her rideshare app and booked a car. The notification popped up. Her driver was on the way. Black sedan, license plate ending in 362. She glanced down the street and saw headlights approaching. A black sedan slowed to a stop right in front of her. The driver leaned over and gave her a small nod. For Samantha? She hesitated for just a second. The car looked right and she was tired. She pulled open the door and slid into the back seat. As they pulled away from the curb, she noticed something strange. The driver never started the trip on the app. The map on her phone still showed her waiting at the bar. "Hey, did you start the ride?" she asked, forcing a small laugh to hide her unease. The man glanced at her in the rearview mirror. His expression was unreadable. "Bad signal. Don't worry, I know where we're going." Something felt wrong. The streets they turned down weren't familiar, not the usual route home. The city lights seemed to fade as they entered a quieter, darker area. Samantha's heartbeat quickened. She tapped her phone screen, ready to call someone. But suddenly the driver reached back and snatched the device from her hands. No phones! Samantha's stomach dropped. This wasn't her driver. This wasn't her ride. She fumbled for the door handle, but the child lock was on. She was trapped. What happened next was the stuff of nightmares. Her screams pierced the quiet streets, but no one was around to hear them. By the time her real driver arrived at the bar minutes later, waiting for her in confusion, Samantha was already gone. It took police hours to piece together what had happened. Surveillance footage showed the real driver pulling up, waiting. But just minutes before, a different car, a near-identical black sedan, had arrived first. A predator who had been lurking, waiting outside bars for unsuspecting victims. A man who knew how rideshares worked, who knew that in the haze of a late night, drunk or tired, passengers rarely double-checked the license plate. Samantha's body was found 2 days later, miles away from where she was taken. The fake driver, a repeat offender, someone who had tried this before, and scariest of all, he wasn't even a driver for any rideshare service. He was just someone with a car and an opportunity. Samantha's story is a chilling reminder. Always check the license plate, always confirm the driver's name, because sometimes the person behind the wheel isn't there to take you home. James had just landed in a city he'd never been to before. A work trip, nothing exciting, just a few meetings and a dull hotel room waiting for him on the other side of town. The airport was still bustling, even at this late hour. He pulled his suitcase behind him, exhaustion settling in as he stepped outside into the crisp night air. A line of yellow cabs waited near the curb. Drivers leaning against their doors, chatting in hushed voices. "Taxi, sir?" James nodded and followed the man to his cab, a beat-up old sedan with a flickering rooftop light. It wasn't in the best shape, but at this hour he didn't care. He just wanted to get to his hotel. Where to? The Maplewood Hotel? At first, everything seemed normal. The driver made small talk, asking where James was from, what he did for work, but something about the man put James on edge. His eyes darted to the rearview mirror a little too often. His hands gripped the wheel too tightly. "You travel a lot for work?" Yeah, every couple of months. Must get lonely?" James forced a chuckle. He glanced at his phone, watching the little blue dot on his map. But something was wrong. They weren't heading toward the hotel. "Hey, I think you missed the turn." The driver didn't answer. He just kept driving. "Sir?" James tried again, his voice tightening. "Shortcut," the driver finally said, but his tone had changed. It was flat, cold. James stared at the map. They were going the complete opposite direction. His stomach twisted. "No, man, just take me back the right way," James insisted, trying to keep his voice steady. The street lights were growing sparser, the buildings thinning out. They were leaving the city. The cab wasn't slowing down. James made a decision. He wasn't going to wait to find out where this road led. Slowly, carefully, he reached for the door handle. But just as he did, the driver's voice cut through the silence. "Door's locked, buddy." James's heart pounded against his ribs. His fingers hovered over his phone, ready to dial 911, but before he could, the driver suddenly slammed the brakes. "Get out!" Without thinking, James fumbled with the lock, throwing his weight against the door. This time it opened. He stumbled out onto the road, his suitcase forgotten in the back seat. The driver didn't say another word. He just sped off into the night. Shaken, James called the police. But when they ran the cab's plate, they found something chilling. The car wasn't registered to any taxi service, and the man driving it? He had a record, a long one: assault, kidnapping, even a suspected murder charge that was later dropped due to lack of evidence. James had barely escaped with his life. The scariest part? He had picked the cab himself. Sometimes the real danger isn't the driver you're assigned, but the one you choose without a second thought. For most rideshare drivers, the job is routine. Pick up a passenger, drop them off, repeat. But every now and then, a ride doesn't go the way it should. And some rides leave behind questions that can never truly be answered. It was nearly 2 a.m. when Eric accepted his final ride of the night. He had been driving for hours, his eyelids heavy, his patience thin. Just one more trip, and then he could go home. The request came from a quiet part of town near the edge of the city, where streetlights flickered and empty sidewalks stretched on for blocks. Eric pulled up to the location, scanning the darkened street. No one was there. Just an old bench beneath a dim street lamp swaying slightly in the wind. He frowned, double-checking the app. Passenger Jonah, 1 seat, 5-star rating. Before he could reach for his phone, there was a tap on the back window. Eric jumped. He hadn't seen anyone approach. "For Jonah?" Eric asked, glancing in the rear-view mirror. The passenger nodded. A man in his late 30s wearing an old grey hoodie. His face was shadowed by the dim interior light. "Late night, huh?" Eric said, forcing a chuckle as he pulled away from the curb. The man didn't respond. He just stared out the window, his face barely visible in the passing glow of the streetlights. Eric had given plenty of rides to quiet passengers before. Some people just didn't want to talk. But something about this man's silence was different, unsettling. Long night, no answer. Eric's hands tightened on the wheel. He flicked his eyes to the mirror again, studying the man's reflection. Something about him was off. The way he sat, too still. The way he didn't blink. The way his hood barely seemed to move, as if there was nothing underneath. After another few minutes of silence, Eric's nerves started to fray. He glanced at the GPS, just 5 more miles to the destination. That's when he noticed it. The temperature in the car had dropped. The windows were fogging up despite the heat being on. Something in the back seat shifted. Eric's stomach twisted. He glanced in the mirror one last time, and his blood ran cold. The seat behind him was empty. His hands jerked the wheel, swerving slightly as his mind scrambled for an explanation. He had just seen the guy. He had heard him get in the car. Eric slammed on the brakes, heart hammering in his chest. He whipped around. Nothing. No one. The seatbelt lay untouched. The door still locked. The app still showed the ride in progress, but the passenger gone. Shaking, Eric turned back around and drove straight home, cancelling the ride altogether. When he checked the app history later, his blood turned to ice. There was no record of Jonah, no completed trip, no ride request at all. Eric never picked up a late-night passenger again, and to this day he still wonders who or what got into his car that night.